So, hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Cyber Exchange's Innovator Spotlight, where we meet remarkable people and innovative solutions in the cybersecurity industry. I'm Armstead Whitney, the CEO of Aptiga, and really excited today to have Ottavio Freire, who is with SafeguardCyber. Ottavio, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Armstead, for having me.
Well, I am really excited about today's session because we're really going to be talking about a topic that is so timely, which is really around digital channel security. And it's all about how businesses are now using social media platforms as a part of their daily business routines, and securing that information, that data is really, really critically important. So I'm really looking forward to learning about how we can secure our enterprise in this really important area. So I guess, Ottavio, kind of start off, what is SafeguardCyber?
Well, so SafeguardCyber is a compliance and cybersecurity platform that protects these modern channels. Everything from WhatsApp and WeChat to Teams and Zoom that we're on today here, to social media channels such as LinkedIn. They've really become a source of growth for enterprises, but they also bring, security compliance challenges when they're turned on. In fact, the compliance and security challenge is what holds back enterprises from that growth that is possible by incorporating these channels into their business processes.
Yeah, so are you seeing kind of a big wave of businesses adapting to what would be looked at as more of a consumer app digital channel, now bringing that into the enterprise? Is that something you're seeing, and kind of how are they using these different platforms today that maybe are different than maybe they were using them a couple years ago?
No, absolutely, Armstead. When we started, we saw that adoption taking place. I don't think it comes as a surprise that with COVID really turbocharged, accelerated. It was, a nice to have with a long tail in terms of implementation. And then it became a must have, unless we do this, we don't survive moment, right? It's just the reality of how businesses are going through. Experiencing. So I'll give you, for instance, we have retailers that were selling through WhatsApp, and then the hackers all took notice. We have, look at our own experiences. We have to live in Zoom and Teams and Slack, and hackers took notice. The employees went home, and they are now choosing the apps that help them accomplish their business, and the hackers took notice. So we're seeing business processes, everything from sales through customer support, through marketing, really relying on these digital channels to conduct the business. And that's where we can really help.
Do you think there's a mindset of people that think, hey, I'm just using this digital channel, at home and with my family, maybe my network of friends, and hey, I'm just going to start using it for my business, and they just don't think about the security? That the lines are kind of blurring between how they use these apps at home and maybe how they might use them in the workplace?
Absolutely, that's a great question, I'm said, and hence the challenge, right? This gray area of it's mine, it's not the enterprise, but I use for business, but I use for is what the hackers are exploiting, and it also makes the enterprises concerned about bringing controls into them. That gray area is an opportunity, and we've seen them, a step up of the weaponization of these apps, more sophisticated attacks.
Right.
And
Right.
it's an interesting, if you take a step back and you think about the attack surface for communications, you've got email that's super well protected, sometimes with 3 layers of security. But then businesses migrating to all this long tail of mobile apps, and they're mostly mobile. You access them on your phone primarily, in all these cases, but also from the desktop. So, enterprises haven't, up until this moment, really had a platform outside of SafeguardCyber that respected the privacy of the users on this channel. And we'll talk about total privacy, which is a big breakthrough for us in terms of how to enable these platforms and save the privacy. But, these employees need to accomplish their work. These apps are very easily, in 1 minute, I can have a new one. in a BYOD environment, it gets more complicated. How do you inherit immediately the compliance and security that you have of every other your SaaS applications is really the mandate and the challenge to take advantage of these channels, but not put the enterprise at risk.
Yeah, I mean, they're becoming business critical now. They're not just sort of sitting on the sidelines that, we use these apps occasionally with business. It's now mission critical, and we're putting a lot of information, PII, classified information, personal information, business information, IP on these channels. So one question that I have is, do you have any stories or anecdotes of how the threat actors have taken advantage of these digital channels? Any type of breaches or incidents that sort of top of mind?
Yeah, there's several now well documented in the press. So Pegasus, for example, was conducted against Jeff Bezos. It was through WhatsApp. He played a video, and that was just the start of the whole process. It read all his browser history, it put a keylogger, it recorded his phone conversation, exfiltrated multiple gigabytes in a few minutes. Very sophisticated. Some say might have cost as much as $700,000. But we're also seeing these attacks, and that's exactly the nature of it. They're moving from phishing to very targeted spear phishing. The blast is hope someone clicks.
Right.
The trend is going down on that. And these channels really are very good to enable very targeted social engineering. I can find out who all the positions are in the company. I can understand their persona, their psychology through these social channels. I can do asset discovery, if you will. And then I can tailor my attack through these channels as well. And they're a combination of channels often. So Operation Sharpshooter was another example. It combined LinkedIn, WhatsApp, and Box. There are two threat actors that we've worked well documented with our partner CrowdStrike. One is Twisted Chalima that has a WhatsApp LinkedIn technique that they've repeated, and the other one is Naze, which is a Russian player who also uses digital channels and combined with the dark web. So you're seeing the emergence of threat actors who are have kits and models on these channels. And then one attack we defeated was conducted from Eastern Europe against WhatsApp users in the medical field with a weaponized PDF. They controlled a lot of fake WhatsApp accounts that connected to the employees of this organization. It was in the healthcare space, we'll leave it at that. And the nature of it, I think, is, if you all can picture it, you've got all your mobile phones, all mobile apps on your phone, and they all have that nasty share button. And I say nasty because I use it a lot. It's super helpful, but it makes the enterprise porous. Yeah. Meaning I can hit the share for a link, for a file, for a piece of content that is part of a social engineering campaign into another app. So I can move from WhatsApp into email. I can move from WhatsApp into Slack. So the enterprise becomes porous because as soon as I share in this case, a weaponized PDF from WhatsApp into Slack, you create vulnerability. In this case, they shared actually from WhatsApp into a WhatsApp group that had 300 colleagues, and about 35% of those colleagues actually went on to open that file. It was also, some of them were actually open on the desktop. It had a Windows component to it. So,
oh, wow. Yeah.
So you can see why this is, a let's call it modern attack vector, lack of a better word, but also just shows an incredibly fragmented nature of the attack surface.
Do companies, how are they addressing it today? Is it just kind of an awareness thing, or maybe they just think that, hey, WhatsApp and Zoom and Teams and, all these different platforms are already locked down? And is that kind of a bad assumption?
I the challenge going on today is that they don't have the control, right? There's no they have to work through the privacy
Right.
to put a control, and because they don't have control, they don't have visibility.
Right. Right.
So often in that kind of setup, in jumping without a parachute, if you will, to pick your analogy, then you find out when there's a breach.
Right.
Um, you're being reactive as opposed to proactive. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations still find themselves in that position. And it's the
Right.
problem that's easy to solve. Meaning with a platform such as SafeguardCyber, you can have the control, you can gain the visibility, you can start understanding what users are the most risky in what channels. You can map it to your business process and see where the organization has really made some apps mission critical, right? And you can, proverbially grade your fish. So
Right.
I think there, a continuum of maturity. We find organizations that are mature, that are now very aware and have a business process, and you know, some are still coming up to speed.
Yeah, it sounds like a really, really, big market opportunity for Safeguard Cyber. Well, I'd love just to learn more about your solution. I think this is an area that a lot of people just need some education on. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing. If you want to pull up, a kind of a visual or two on kind of how it works, we'd love to see it.
All right. So Armstead, this is one way to visualize what is taking place in terms of the space, right? I think we all recognize that email securities has been the main source of communication for the enterprise. Security professionals know this. It continues to be a major attack vector. It's super well protected. You might have some cases, 3 levels of protection, 3 different vendors protecting your email. And as we all know, ransomware still comes through this channel. You and I were talking about some stats that, depending on who you ask, without spear phishing awareness, 27% come through. With spear phishing awareness, that number dropped to single digits, but they still come through despite all this education and training, technology, and vendors and budget. But look how, not to scare, to create too much of a scary picture, but look at the other side of the equation here, right? All these channels, from Slack to Teams to Zoom to WhatsApp to Telegram. SafeguardCyber has 52 digital channels. They're all mobile apps as well that we protect. And without a platform like SafeguardCyber, you're incredibly vulnerable. We've realized that these platforms are not inherently security platforms. That Microsoft, with all its investment in security, they still are vulnerable. Imagine, where these applications started from, right? Their baseline and their maturity. Emails are very, very mature piece of technology, been around for decades. These are not that mature in their development life cycle. So the analogy applies. You do have to bring those controls. You have to create visibility, and ultimately you have to add protection and the ability to quarantine, not just let you know that there's a threat and a coordinated attack that's being taking place across. Sometimes actually email and these channels, they are often multi-vector attacks that take place. You have to be able to do something about those attacks real time, just like you do in email.
And that list where it says social channels, you've got about 6 or 7 listed there. My guess is, given the investments in collaboration and productivity tools, because of COVID sort of driving that digital transformation, I'm guessing that list is probably going to increase exponentially over the next couple of years as new apps come out. There's something called Clubhouse, right, which is a clubby thing where people can engage in new ways. I mean, it's a startup, and I don't know about their security, but it seems like that list is going to get bigger.
That's right. We started in social, actually, and then we realized the attacks are really multifaceted, and we expanded significantly to 52 apps. This is just a small representation of them. But what we really built was a platform to release new channels because it just continues to grow very quickly. To your point,
Yep.
it feels like there's always something new, right? And because there's also new, enterprises need to use the new, and the problem perpetuates of compliance and security.
Yep.
So this is an architecture we like to use. So let me explain what's going on here. So if you think about what's outside the perimeter, right? That enterprises use or are sources. There are really kind of two components to it. There's the dark blue, which are outside. Assets outside the perimeter that you are public. In other words, they're not closed gardens. And then there are the closed gardens that you own, right? Both of those digital assets exist outside the enterprise perimeter. And the attack varies. It's different, I should say, because of that nature. One is a public, one is private. So give you, for instance, your LinkedIn account is a social media, but it allows direct messages to you. So the kill chain looks like I create a fake LinkedIn. I understand your desires and interests. I can establish a connection with you. When you connect with me or with a fake account, I can now send you a direct message. So this becomes far more of a spear phishing attack, right? It's very targeted to your executive. True for mobile chat channels like WhatsApp and WeChat. True for collaboration channels. So the nature of the attack when it's a private channel is different. Now, on the public ones, you find issues of impersonation. That's what happens now across these domains and websites and marketplaces. One of the big, one of the major attacks we're seeing right now is like these fake hiring schemes where I pretend to be your organization, and I create even a job listing to fish your potential future employees using your brand. So these things are taking place, but that's not on an asset you own. So you need to identify those and take them down as well. And if you think about a multi-layered attack, starting from those public attack surfaces, in terms of all your outward-facing websites, your social media brand pages, your social accounts, all the marketplaces and mobile app stores where you put products that are all public culture and sites. And what takes place on these privates, it's all about breaching the enterprise perimeter to move laterally. That's the goal, right?
Right. Get in the door, and then now you're in.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. I ultimately want to, I hope as an attacker, you're on a VPN. So now I'm on your phone, I move laterally through your phone into the corporate network.
And that's the key. That's where it really happens. Yep.
Right. And that's been the case of some of these targeted actors that we're seeing that have developed techniques in a multi-layered attack. The end goal is to get a secondary download in the enterprise perimeter that can move laterally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does it work, right? Getting a little bit more specific here, and this will be my last slide. If you think about all these platforms, we have an architecture that is fast to deploy. It's there's no agents. It's completely agentless. It's tied to the account, so it's network agnostic. If you move from networks, it's to protect your accounts. If you move even devices, right? If you change from your iPad to your mobile phone to your desktop, it all offers protection. It's agentless. There's nothing to install, so incredibly quick deployment. And when you have 4,000 WhatsApp users, when you have, in one case, one of our customers had 100,000 Teams users, you have to have that kind of quick deployment portability. It has to be lightweight. You can't You can't really install agents anymore on specific devices.
Yep.
Well, that's key to our architecture. So it's all API-based security. So we move that data into our data lake. Our machine learning goes to work in our security stack, looking for detections against, in every link, in every message, in every file, in every image. These are all sources of risk that is common amongst all these channels. But there's really, if you think about it, there's two types of attacks. There's what we call the hard attacks. There's an asset involved, there's a file, there's a link. But there's a soft attack, which is, these channels make it turbocharge it, like make it more possible, where through the conversation, I can get you to accomplish something malicious, right? So they are more akin to business email compromise, but of course that name is unfortunate because that would mean that it only takes place in email. So we like to call it business communications compromise. And our machine learning detects that as well, and stops those attacks that take place on the social engineering attacks that take place everywhere from WhatsApp to Telegram to LinkedIn, and even the enterprise apps, such as Slack, where this is all possible, right? But then finally, it's not about just the detection; it's about the response, and this is where it needs to look a lot more like email protection systems than threat intelligence. It finds a file, it strips it to the avoid employee, clicks on it, and then it gets into the enterprise. It stops, quarantines a link. That social engineering about that thread going back and forth, it will remove it. That fake account that's trying to connect with you, we remove it. That website that is impersonating your brand or your domain, we take that down. So it's connecting the detection to the takedown real time through policy in a machine learning engine, and all this under that privacy framework, going back to our original discussion. Without total privacy, without respecting the gray area that exists, you really can't make adoption progress.
Right. You got to have that privacy as a part of the equation for sure. To the users, and it looks like because it's a very light agentless deployment, that as new social channels come out, digital channels, you can just add those fairly easily as a new login. So
That's right.
that's great that it can grow as the market grows.
Right. And the compliance front, just to finish this up, there are also language-based risks, right? A FINRA issue, an adverse event, HIPAA violation, a PII violation.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So our security stack, it's called Threat Cortex, accomplishes both addresses security risk and compliance risk that are also language-based. We like to call it the natural language understanding engine as opposed to natural language processing, because context is important to identify these compliance issues as well.
Oh yeah. Well, speaking of compliance, why don't we show everybody where on Cyber Exchange you guys show up in all the different areas that you map to. So I'll grab the screen from you and we'll jump into Cyber Exchange. I'll just expand this as well. There we go. So this is the private marketplace for SafeguardCyber. You can Google them or search for them here on the platform, or pull them down as a provider in Cyber Exchange. And the great thing about Cyber Exchange is we've mapped SafeguardCyber to all the major frameworks. So I could pick, CMMC, SOC 2, HIPAA, et cetera, and make that as a filter. But here you see all the categories. And it's funny, Ottavio, when I first did this for our podcast, I couldn't believe how many places that your solution maps, because it's so broad. Application security, obviously it's an application. Asset management, what are people using for acceptable use? What are the things you've got to worry about around the assets in the enterprise? Scrolling down, vulnerability management. Obviously, it's a gateway for vulnerabilities. You've got to be able to identify those gateways and lock those down, monitor those gateways, and even more. If I click on the more, governance, because a lot of these frameworks actually require, this type of level of protection. So I think, for our audience, let's just not assume that the social media and digital channels have it figured out, because we read every day in the news about those compromises and how these lines are blurring between, consumer and business apps. So all you'll do is just click on a tile, and you can learn a lot more about SafeguardCyber. There's a great little video. I watched this today as well. It's really cool. It really explains a lot of what Ottavio went over as well. And there's a 10% discount through Cyber Exchange, which our members really love, and there's some pricing information. So this was really great. I know we're coming to the end, but this is not something you see every day. This innovation around really what is the next generation of communication and productivity tools for the enterprise, which is using these digital channels. Ottavio, I really enjoyed this. Thank you much for joining, and I'd love to keep following your success. I think it's fantastic. So thanks again for sharing this today.
Thank you, Armstead, and thank you for all the work. Really appreciate all the mapping you've done. We love your platform and how it makes it easier for folks who find us and adopt. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, to everybody here joining us, we look forward to seeing you on the next Innovator Spotlight podcast. Until then, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again soon.